Sure. Okay, Be'ezus Hashem, today's daf is Masechta Baba Kamma, daf Yud Gimel, number 13. So we're in the middle of this discussion over here, and just to quickly review, everybody knows that in order to be mechayev, mechayev to pay, if your animal gores somebody else's animal, that animal had to belong to somebody else. Right? It's because the Torah says shor re'eu. If your animal gores the ox of your friend, that's when you're obligated to pay. The question that we're dealing with here, the Mishnah says it's not necessarily so. If your friend made hegdish a shlomim, so he has a little animal that he's obligated to bring up to the Beis Hamikdash to be makrav as a shlomim. So since it's kachim kalim, it's the lighter form of kachim. So our Mishnah, who is of the opinion of Rabbi Yossi HaGalili, who says, Kachim Kalim, remember these words? Mammon Bailim. It's the money of the owner. The animal started out as his property. He consecrated it to be a carbon shlamim, but he did not yet bring it as a carbon shlamim. It's still considered Mammon Bailim. So if that animal got gored, you have to pay, correct? Now, what happens after Shechita? We just learned that yesterday. After Shechita, even Rabbi Yossi HaGalili agrees that the meat itself, the meat that after you shechted in the Beis Hamikdash, is not your meat. It's God giving it to you from His table. And therefore, if you take that meat and go to a lady and says, here's this for Kedushin, it doesn't work. So the Gemara is just going to ask a quick question, but it takes a little long to do it. But the bottom line is, that there's Rabbi Yossi HaGalili only said this by carbon shlomim, which is a type of kachikalim that the man himself was mekadesh. But what about a bechor? A bechor belongs to the kohen, right? Bechor belongs to the kohen, but it's not really consecrated from that it was somebody made it kedushadik. It was kedush kadosh automatically. So that's what the Gemara is going to deal with. Hi, Lewis, we just began. Yud Beis and Beis. Omechayim mi Omar. Did Rabbi Yossi HaGalili say that even when the animal is alive, it's considered to be the money of the property of the owner? But now we learned to the Mishnah, the Bechor, which is Bizman Hazeh. This Bechor is, nowadays, if a kohen you give it to the kohen, what could he do with it? You give him the gift, and the kohen could sell it as even if it did not have a mum. And the person that buys it will wait till it gets a blemish and then could eat it for himself. That's how because the bechor belongs to the money of the kohen. Obviously, the kohen can't shecht it because you can't shecht a bechor bizman hazeh. So therefore, the halach is you wait till it gets a mum, and then you could eat it. So that's why he could sell it to somebody else, take the money, and let that person wait until it gets a mum. Ubal mum, but let's say that the bechor has already a bal mum, then you could sell it chai when it's alive, v'shachud even after you shechted it. Umakachim bayis isha, and you could be mekadesh a woman with it, because again, it's bechor bizman hazeh, and therefore it's considered the money of the kohen, and he can sell it. We didn't teach you that it's the money of the kohen el bechor bizman hazeh. Nowadays, if a kohen has a bechor, it was gifted to him by somebody, so then since he cannot be makriv, he can't bring it to the Beis Hamikdash. It's considered the money of the kohen. It's kachim kalim. When the Beis Hamikdash was around, a bechor, you had to bring it as a carbon. The kohen had to bring it as a carbon. So it's not considered the money of the kohen. So we see here right away, Rav Nachman is interpreting this brisa that kachi kalim bizman hazeh is not considered mammon bailim. It's considered to be mammon gavoy. It belongs to the Eibishter. So the Gemara is going to extend that and ask a question. Maybe he disagreed. Maybe he's not going with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi HaGalili, but we do see that he likes Rabbi Yossi HaGalili. Rav Nachman likes Rabbi Yossi HaGalili, and nevertheless, he's going to say that Rabbi Yossi HaGalili did not extend this to when the Beis Hamikdash was around. That's what Rava asked the question of Rav Nachman. Mal Bashem, the rabbis kochim kalam shem amoyne div Rabbi Yossi Aglili. How could you say when the Beis Hamikdash was around, you Rav Nachman, that according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili it's Mam and Gavaya? We see that Rabbi Yossi Aglili says clearly, even when the Beis Hamikdash was around, that it is the money of the Bailam. It belongs to the owner. Umashani and Ravina answered on behalf of Rab Nachman. The Bechor b'chutz laaretz, v'alibed Rab Shimon, da'ama in ba'im mitimi yikru ba'im in l'tchetchil loy. That Rabbi Yossi Galili over here was not saying that every kachim kalim bisman shebeis hamikdash and kayim was mamoyne shel kohen. It's only a Bechor b'chutz laaretz. And according to Rab Shimon, that Bechor b'chutz laaretz, even when the Beis Hamikdash was around, you don't have to bring it up. You shouldn't bring it to the Beis Hamikdash. If a Bechor was born in United States, you don't, according to, even when the Beis Hamikdash was around, according to Rab Shimon, just leave it in the United States. If you end up bringing it to the Beis Hamikdash, fine, but you don't have to bring it. You shouldn't bring it. So only then, Rabbi Yossi Galili said that's Mamoyne Shel Bailim. But every other Kachin Kalim should be considered Mamoyne Shel Gavoya. If it's true what you said, Rabbi Yossi Aglili said that every kachim kalim is considered the bailam's money when it's alive. So we go to Amid Aleph, Lishni, he should have answered, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Harabanim. That Rab Nachman goes according to Rabbanim, that every kachim kalim is considered to be Maman Gavoya. And Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds every kachim kalim is considered mom and bailim. It must be that Rabbi Nachman liked Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Nobody holds that kachim kalim is mom and bailim. It's only a unique kachim kalim called Bechor, even when the Beis Hamikdash was around, bechutz laaretz. So how do you square off? We just got through saying that Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds every shlomim that you own, even when the Beis Hamikdash was around, is considered, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Maman Bailam. And says the Gemara, you're right. Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds, and this is the clear answer, every shlomim, if you have a shlomim that you didn't bring up to the Beis Hamikdash yet, Rabbi Yossi Aglili will hold, that's Maman Bailam. But Bechor, Rabbi Yossi Aglili will say, Matnas Kuhuna Kamra, since it's a gift from the Kohen, that's what you're talking about. Since it comes from the Eibishter, Matnas Kahuna, nobody was makdish a Bechor. It was just gifted to a Kohen, and it had Kedusha from the get-go, from the day it was born. Everybody, even Rabbi Yossi Galili, will agree that a Bechor, even when it's alive, is considered to be Maman Gavaya. So that's how the Gemara ends it off over here. Gufa, we learned in the Brisa. We learned before. Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds that every kachim kalim, and we said this could be, let's say, a shlomim, that's considered the money it's the property of the owner. These are the words of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Ben Azai, I remember Azai says, the Rabbi says shlomim. Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Ben Azai is explaining Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and he's saying that Rabbi Yossi Aglili only said this by shlomim. Wow. Ben Azai says that Rabbi Yossi Aglili said even by Bechor, right, when the Beis Hamikdash was around, that's still considered the money of the Kohen. It's considered the money of its owner. So now the Gemara just explains this brisa. Amamar, Ben Azai Omer. And again, all this relates to what do you need to know if it's the money of the owner, if it's the money of Hashem. The answer is that if that animal is gored, if it's considered your money, the animal that did the goring has to pay you. And if it's considered not your money, it's considered God's money, the Torah says only when your Share'eu is gored, that's when you obligated to pay. But Shar Shel Hegdish, you're not. Anyway, so Amamar, we learned before, Ben Azai says, L'Rabbi says Shlomim. Rabbi Azai explained Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and he said it included Shlomim, that Shlomim, when it's alive, it's considered to be the moment of the Bailim. Lemutamai, what did that exclude? Ilay Lemute Bechor. Did Rabbi Azai exclude Bechor? I don't need him to tell me that, Bechor is considered Maman Gavaya. Of course, Shlomim it's Maman Gavaya. That's not true, because Hashta, once you tell me that Shlomim is Maman Bailim, according to the Gemara now, Bechor is Mom and Bailim. Why? Because Hashtamash Shlomim. Shlomim seems to be a holier carbon. Shutu'unim smicha. When you bring it, you have to put your hands on it. Unisachim. It's a type of carbon that needs nisachim. Utnufas chazav shoik, and you need to, when you shecht it and you bring it in the base of Mikdash, you have to do tnufa with the breast and the foreleg. So Amar, despite that, it's a more holier carbon, so to speak, a shlamim, mom and bailim. You're telling me that's when it's alive, it's considered the money, the property of its owner. Bechor, biboya, do I need to tell you that a bechor is certainly the mom and bailim? Of course it is. Rabbi Yochanan said, lemute meiser. Meiser is a type of shlamim called meiser behema. Every 10th behema that's born in your flock, right, from that year, you have to consecrate it as a meiser behema. And you bring it as a shlamim. It's a type of shlamim. That type of shlamim is more holier than a regular shlamim, and it's more holier than a bechor. In what way? In the way that when it's alive, you can't sell it, but bechor you could sell. So therefore, that's the chiddush. That ma'aser behema, although it's a type of shlamim, since it has a little bit more holiness than a bechor, so to speak, more restrictions, it's considered to be Ma'aser behema. If you own a ma'aser behema, it's momen gavoya. The time we learned in the braysa, the bechor nema loy sivda. V'nim ketam chay balmum shachai shachet. A bechor, it says, don't redeem it, and therefore a bechor, once it's given to the kohen, he can sell it, or he can sell it as a balmum. But ma'aser behema, if you own a ma'aser behema, remember ma'aser behema, you let them out of your pen, and the 10th one is called ma'aser behema. We have a posik with a Gzeir Shava that teaches you that you're never allowed to sell it. You have to bring it as a shlamim. Since it's a little bit more holier than a bechor, when it's alive and you own ma'aser behema, it's considered mammon gavoya. Ravina masni la aseifa. Ravina taught it on the end of the Mishnah, on the end of the Brisa, and he says that this is the interaction of Rabbi Yochanan telling us it's ma'aser behema. Abba's the Yosi ben the Stai Oima. Abba Yostoi ben the Soi says, "Lo Oma ben Azay el b'chor b'lvad." Ben Azay explained Rabbi Yossi Galili that b'chor, only b'chor is mom and bailim, not shlamim. So the Gemara says, "Lemute mai ilema lemute shlamim." You want to exclude shlamim? Wait a second. Bechor is even more kedushadik than shlamim, even though the Gemara just said it before, different. But some ways shlamim is less kedushadik than a bechor. Hashtamar bechor shekodesh merechem. A bechor that has holiness when it's born. You're calling him a moino. It's the moment of the bailim. If Abba Yossi said that it's called mom and bailim, but even though it's a bechor, shlamim mebaya, certainly a shlamim should be considered mom and bailim because it wasn't holy as soon as it was born. Somebody had to make it holy. It was originally the owner's property. So certainly that's considered mom and bailim. Rabbi Yochanan said, "Lemute meiser." He's coming to exclude meiser. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, "Bechor nemar lo yisivda." V'nim ketam chayv balmum chayv v'shochet. But meiser nemar lo yigoel v'nim kol lo chayv lo shochet lo tam lo balmum. So basically, only a bechor is considered to be mom and bailim, but meiser behema, as we said before, since it has more restrictions on it because you can't sell it. Therefore, ma'aser behema is considered mom and gavoya. So that's it. Ma'aser behema is considered mom and gavoya. Says the Gemara. The question is, you're telling me that shlamim is considered mom and bailim according but haba bechor b'vad Kamma. Abba Dostoi said that only a bechor is considered mom and bailim. A regular shlamim is not considered mom and bailim. Kashya, that is difficult. Yeah, that's a good question. So that's the story over here and that Gemara. But what was the point of bringing this all in? Because our Mishnah said, "Nechosim she'ein behem me'ila," that only if you gore a type of, it seemed to say, a type of hegdish that you don't be mechayev a carbon me'ila, which is a type of hegdish like kachim kalim, then you're obligated to pay. So that's how we got through this sugya that told us that our Mishnah is going according to Rabbi Yossi Galili, that told us that Kachim Galim belongs to the owner. It's mom and bailim. Rava says not necessarily so. that our Mishnah is saying anytime you own a holy animal, even if it's kachim kalim, it's still considered God's money. You don't have to pay. And that's what our Mishnah is saying. What does it mean that possessions that you don't bring a carbon me'ilah, the chosr shem ben din me'ilah, any kachem that is not in the parsha and not in the context of where a possibility could be brought to bring a me'ilah. In other words, it's even if it's kachem kalim, but it's in the parsha of animals that are carbonis, which could have a certain subset of those animals, a kachem, where there would be a carbon me'ilah. And so the Mishnah is saying, what is the possessions that you're obligated to pay? The hedyot. If it belongs to a common person, but if it has any holiness in the animal, you're not obligated to pay. Says the Gemara of Elishni the hedyot. Let it say. Why didn't the Braises just say that? Why didn't the Mishnah say that you're only obligated to pay if the owner of the animal is a commoner, not hegdish? Kasha, that's a difficult question. Another piece of Gemara, new Gemara. Amar Ab Abba. Now, we know a carbon shlamim, you bring it to the base of Mikdash, and you get to eat the meat, right? But the fats remain on the Mizbeach, and they get burnt, and so to speak, they're eaten by God. So till now, we've been learning the inyan of if somebody was goring the shlamim. Rabbi Abba is now discussing the reverse. Shlamim shehiziku, a carbon shlamim that was mazik, another person. So you brought it as a carbon. Now it still owes the money to the one it did damage to. So goyvim and besarim, the ain't a goyvim eimaraim. The guy can collect from the meat of the carbon and not from the fats, because the fat's already eaten by God, so to speak. But the animal itself, since it's taken home and eaten, and therefore the one who got the damage, the one who suffered the damages with his animal, can now collect from the meat. So the Gemara says, Pshita, that is obvious. You're putting the fats on the Mizbeach. That's being eaten by Hashem, so to speak. Where are you going to collect from? Answers the Gemara, I needed to tell me, I would think that since half the damage was caused by the fats and half the damage was caused by the meat, since you can't collect from the fat side of the damage, you should collect the entire damage, the entire cost of the damage from just the meat. So normally, if it was a tam, let's say, if it was a tam, the shlamim was a tam, so you would be able to collect half from the meat part and half the damages from the fat part, because they're both partners in committing this crime. But now that the fats are being eaten by Hashem, so you should be able to collect. You should be able to collect the whole parts from the meat part, and in fact, you should be able to collect even the entire damage just from the meat itself. You don't have to go halfway. So the Gemara says, "Aliba deman." Who are you trying to tell me this according to? Aliba derabbanan. The Gemara has a case later on. We'll learn that, let's say, a tam animal gored an animal but didn't kill it. What happened was he pushed it into a bar. So now you have two people that did now if it's a tam, so you collect half from the animal. What about the pit? The pit doesn't have to pay because the pit didn't do the damage. It was pushed in by another animal. That's the opinion of Rabbanan. So and the Rabbi Nosson holds no. Since you're only collecting half the damage from the shar, because it was a tam, you'll collect 3/4 of the damage so basically you're going to collect only 1/4 of the damage from the tam. Since it had a partner, you'll collect 3/4 of the damage from the pit. So the Gemara says, what did Rab Abba teach us? If he's going according to Rabbanan, Pshit, it's obvious. Ha'amri Rabbanan say, when you can't collect from one partner, you don't collect from the other partner to make up for the loss. So here, obviously, according to Rabbanan, you would say, since you can't collect from the Amirim, don't collect the Amirim's part of this damage from the meat. So certainly, Rabbanan will say you wouldn't collect from the meat to compensate what you can't collect from the fats. You leave the Rav Nosson, but if you go according to Rav Nosson in that opinion, Ha'amar, he said over there, when you can't collect from one partner, you get collect from the other. Since you cannot collect the full damages from the ox because it was a tam, so you'll only collect a quarter of the damage. So you'll collect 3/4 of the damage from the bar. So same thing, according to Rab Nosson, since you can't collect from the Amorim, you'll collect the full damage from the meat. So what is Rab Abba coming to teach you? Answers the Gemara, Rab Nosson, Rab Banan. I could say Rab Abba goes according to Rab Nosson, and or I could say he goes according to Rabbanan. If you want to say Rabbanan, Hanimili betray Gufe. When did Rabbanan say that if you can't collect from one, you don't collect from the others? When you have two partners, there the case of the Rabbanan is a shar that pushed another shar into a pit. So there are two distinct partners in crime. So therefore, since you can't collect from the shore, the damage, you don't go collecting from the bar. But if it was one animal which has the meat and the fats, I would have thought you can say, I want to collect my damages from any part of the animal that I want. Since I can't collect from the fats, allow me to collect from the meat. That's why to make up for my loss from the fats. So that's what Rabbi Abba says. Even according to Rabbanan, even in one body, you can't shift. You can't shift compensation from one part of the body to the other part of the body, from the fats to make up for what you can't. You're shifting it to the meat to make up what you can't collect from the fats. Iba is saying, but if you want, I could tell you, Rab Nosson, Hasam who the Amalei Bal Shar LeBalabar, Anotar Virach Ashkechei, my Delesh Le Lishtalume Mehech, Mishtalim Nemenach. By Rab Nosson said that since you can't collect the full damages from the ox because it was a tam, the reason why you collected from the pit, because the victim, whose animal is now in this pit, will say, my ox was found in your pit. What I cannot collect from the ox, I'll collect from you, the owner of the pit. It's like, when you sue people, you don't just sue one person, you sue everybody who might have a connection to it. All these, all the vendors get sued. So that's what Rab Nosson said over there. We go to Amid Beis. Over here, can he say that the basar did the damage, the Amorin did not do the damage? So therefore, obviously, since you can't say that the basar did more of the damage than the Amorin, therefore half the value of the Amorin you should lose. That's what you should say. So we tell him no. Even in that case, no, it's not true. Amar Rava. Rava said like this. We tell him that he does lose that. So Amar Rava. Toida shehiziku goyvim ebsara ve'ina begoyvim lachma. A guy who has a carbon toida. So that's the whole animal, right? So where do you collect the damages after you bring the carbon? You collect it from the meat that he brings home, and not from the breads. The breads is a separate entity. And therefore, that bread didn't do the damage. It was the animal that did the damages. Remember, there are 40 loaves that are brought with a carbon toida that you do tenufa with, but it's not. It's just it's auxiliary to the actual carbon toida. So if this animal toida did damage, then you brought it as a carbon. The victim collects from the meat and doesn't collect from the breads. So the Gemara says, Lechem Pshita, certainly he doesn't collect from the bread because the bread didn't do the damage. And says the Gemara, Sefer Itzrachalei. I need it for Rava's teaching you what he meant to say to complete his statement. Nizik oichel basar u'mischaper mevi lechem. That nevertheless, despite the victim will now be eating the meats because he forfeited the meats of this carbon toida because it has to pay for those damages, but the owner of the taita still has to bring the breads. So in order to get a kapara. Hanami Pshita says that's obvious. Since he committed to bring a carbon taita, why shouldn't we say he has to bring a bread despite the fact that he's not going to be eating the meat? Mahu, the same I would have thought, Kaven de lachem hechsher de zevachu, since the what makes the carbon taita a carbon taita is the fact that you're bringing the breads. So Leimelei, let the owner of the taita said, since at achal basar, now you're going to eat the meat. Vano I say lechem, now I'm forced to pay for the breads. Kamash malam the lechem chiyuv de balamu teaches you that the obligation of the balim, the original owner, doesn't go away, despite the fact now he forfeited the meat of this carbon taita because it did a damage. He still has to bring the breads. Next, new Gemara. The Mishnah said, "Nechosim shehein shel b'nei bris." You're only obligated to pay only if the gox, the victim, was a Jew, was a Jew who has a bris milah, so to speak. Lemute mai. What does that exclude? Ilimute de goy. If it's trying to tell you that a goy's animal you don't have to pay if you gored. We learned that in the next Mishnah. Shar shel Yisrael shenagach shal shagoy. An ox of a Jew that gored the ox belonging to a goy, you potter, the Jew is potter from paying. So why does it say it over here if it's going to say it later on? Answers the Gemara, Tana ahadam afarish. It just says it once and then it explains it again in more detail. Next, Mishnah says nechosim hamiyuchadim. The possessions have to belong to somebody. Lamute mai, what does that exclude? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, it says like this. Lamute, it's exclusion like this. Let's say a bunch of animals chased after one animal, and we don't know which animal did the goring. So that excludes it. Since you can't definitively point who did the goring, you don't have to pay. None of them have to pay. One guy says your animal did the damage, and the other one says, no, it wasn't my animal, it was this animal. So therefore, that's what the Mishnah is trying to tell you, that nobody has to pay. You have to know exactly who did the damage. As the Gemara, didn't we learn that later on? We learned that later on. If two animals are running after one animal, and then now we don't know which animal did the damage, both of them are potter. So why does it have to say it in our Mishnah when it's going to say the same thing later on? Tana v'hadam afar. Sometimes it says it, and then it goes into more detail in another Mishnah later on. But Masnita Tana in the Brisa explained our Mishnah, Prat l'nichse hefker. Hefker, you don't have to pay. If an animal gored hefker, you don't have to pay. So the Gemara says like this: if my animal gored the animal belonging to hefker, of course they don't have to pay. Man tavale, who's going to try to collect the money from me? Ella, the opposite. The nogach tar de hefker l'tar de dam. If hefker gored my animal, so what's the problem? Let me just grab that hefker animal, and that will become my animal. And says the Gemara, no, but somebody collected that free animal before you got to it. So, but since when it did the goring, it did not belong to anybody, that person who collected the hefker animal does not have to give it up. Ravina comes to say, that means, fascinating thing, if somebody's animal gored, now the animal is in trouble. So what did the owner of the animal do? He made it hegdish, or he made it hefker. That means the owner of the animal doesn't have to pay anymore. Tanya nami hachi, that's the Brisa saying. Yes, okay, Omar Rabbi Yehuda, afilu nogach v'achagach hegdish, nogach v'achagach hegder. The animal you gored, your animal gored, and you made it hegdish or mafker potter your potter. Shneimar, the pasuk says, v'huad beval v'heimish ish, achet hey misa v'amoda bedin shavim ke'achad, until the death of the animal and the going to court of the animal still belonging by its original owner. Ugumar din loibinin, here we'll end. Ugumar din loibinin, we don't need that the animal belonging to the person has to be by the psak. Hashar yisakel b'gumar din hu diksiv. The Torah says that animal gets stoned, and also the owner has to do something if it killed a person. So the animal has to be owned all the way through by the owner up until the psak hadin, the gemar din uksiv. Ella, this is the point. Ema achetehei misa v'hamoda bedin ugemar din shamin ke'achad, until the death of the animal and the going to court with this animal and the final psak still belonging to the original owner, then he has to pay. But if the owner of the animal, just after the negicha, before they went to court or before the Bezdin Paskin, he just made it hektish, or he made the animal hefker, well, the owner of the animal doesn't have to pay. It's very strange. So he could always, if he sees the case is not going in the right direction, he can just magdish it and hefker it, and then the person that suffered the loss will have to remain with that loss. These are the funny things we hear in Masechta Baba Kamma. Okay, we'll stop over here.